Baby, your food is ready. Emeka walks in, his face already clouded with irritation. He sits, lifts the lid, and suddenly his expression twists into fury. Without warning, he grabs the entire bowl and emptied it on baby's head. Hot soup splashed down her hair, her face, her clothes. How dare you? How dare you serve me only 2 pieces of meat? A whole man of the house like me. They said nobody dies from being single, but many have died from marrying wrong. For Debby, this was the day the hunter became the hunted. Debby to everyone who adored her, was the kind of woman people pointed at and whispered about, but always with admiration. She was graceful in the way she walked, polite in the way she spoke, and enviable in the way she lived. Her apartment in the heart of the city was a work of art. To the outside world, Debby had it all. She was the type of woman parents prayed their daughters would grow into and sons would marry. She was independent, sophisticated, and generous to a fault. Yet, beneath all the luxury and poise, she nursed a quiet ache, a void that money, career success, and social recognition could never fill. At night, when her guests had gone and laughter died down, Debby often found herself on her knees in her lavishly furnished bedroom. "Lord," she whispered one night, clutching her Bible tightly, "you have given me everything, except the one thing my heart longs for. Why me? Why is it that my sisters, my cousins, my closest friends are married, and I still am alone? I sow seeds in your house. I pay my tithes faithfully. I help the poor. I bless the orphans. I honor my parents. Why then, Lord? Why have you forsaken me in this one thing my heart longs for?" It wasn't that men didn't approach her. They overdid. In fact, all the time. Some drawn to her beauty, others to her kindness, but most couldn't see past her wealth. The more successful she became, the fewer genuine suitors she encountered. Some men admitted outright that her lifestyle intimidated them. Others pretended, but she always saw it in their eyes, that flicker of fear and insecurity. Debby's mother, an elderly but sharp woman, would sometimes scold her lovingly. "Debby, my daughter, maybe you should tone down the luxury a little. Men want to feel needed." But Debby would smile faintly and reply, "Mama, should I hide my blessings so I can be chosen? The man who is for me should love me for who I am, not for what I lack." Still, as birthdays passed and the silence in her home grew louder, Debby wondered if perhaps she was destined to walk this path alone. One sunny afternoon, Debby sat in her luxurious garden, a place she often retreated to when her heart felt heavy. The flowers bloomed in perfect colors: roses, lilies, hibiscus, all meticulously arranged by her gardener. The fountain trickled softly, and the air carried a calming fragrance. It was her paradise, yet even here she found no peace. As she leaned back in her cushioned chair, staring at the blue sky, the weight of her loneliness pressed against her chest. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time they weren't the same prayers she had always prayed. "Maybe I have been too foolish," she whispered to herself. "Maybe Mr. Right doesn't exist. Maybe I should just settle for anything, for anyone. I'm tired of waiting, Lord, tired of waiting." Those words slipped out, heavy with despair. But what Debby didn't realize was that in moments of weakness, prayers, whether in faith or frustration, carry power. And unfortunately for her, this was one prayer that heaven seemed to answer swiftly. Not long after, a man entered her life. He was charming on the surface, with a sweet tongue and an air of confidence that seemed to promise her relief from her loneliness. He wasn't intimidated by her wealth, at least not openly. In fact, he celebrated it, admired it and encouraged her to flaunt it. To Debby, it was like God had finally answered her prayer. Maybe this is the man I have been waiting for all along. But deep down, a small, still voice in her spirit tried to whisper caution. She ignored it. After all, hadn't she asked for anyone? Little did Debby know that this choice would open the door to the greatest test of her life. One that would either break her completely or drive her into the kind of faith she had never known before. His name was Emeka. On the surface, he was everything a woman of Debby's class should avoid. Rough around the edges, unpolished, and far from successful. He was the kind of man people would take one look at and whisper, "Run." But to Debby, tired of waiting, Emeka's presence felt like relief. It all started one morning as she was driving to work, dressed in one of her elegant corporate gowns, heels clicking against the pavement. She was already running late for a meeting when her luxury SUV suddenly coughed, jerked and stopped. She tried the ignition several times, but nothing worked. Just then, as though fate had staged the moment, a young man strolled out of a nearby shop. Emeka, a petty roadside mechanic, whose hands were already stained with grease. "Madam, you won't try again?" he called out, his voice rich with confidence. Frustrated, Debby sighed. "It won't start. I don't know what else to do. I don't know what's wrong with it. Leave am for me. I dey fix am now," he said with a grin that revealed a row of uneven teeth, but a charm that was hard to ignore. With quick practice movements, Emeka tinkered under the hood. Within minutes, the car rolled back to life. He wiped his hands on his worn-out rag, then stood tall with a playful salute. "See, madam, na small thing. Even big cars, dey humble when they meet correct mechanic." Debby couldn't help but laugh. His humor was disarming, his simplicity refreshing. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen. Not as the rich, intimidating millionaire, but just as a woman. "Thank you, dear," she said, a smile tugging at her lips. "How much do I owe you?" He shook his head, waving her off. "Forget money. Na good woman like you we dey pray may God send our workshop. Just dash me your number, make I check on the car later." Something inside Debby melted. Against every warning bells in her head, she pulled out her phone and gave him her number. That was the beginning. Soon, phone calls turned into visits, and visits into long conversation. Emeka was far from her dream man, but he was warm, attentive, and made her laugh in ways she hadn't in years. She told herself, maybe perfection isn't what I need. Maybe love looks like this. She didn't know it yet, but what seemed like love was about to test her in ways she had never imagined. When Debby opened up to her friends, Cynthia and Favor, about Emeka, who he was and what he did for a living, their reactions were strikingly different. Favor, the type who sugar-coated her words just to remain in people's good books, encouraged Debby without hesitation. "Go ahead," she said with a smile. "You have everything already, so Emeka's financial status shouldn't matter. Love is all that counts." Her words were soothing, yet lacked sincerity. Cynthia, on the other hand, was brutally honest. She frowned and leaned closer to Debby. "Don't settle for less," she warned firmly. Nobody has ever died from being single, but too many women have lost their lives because they married the wrong man. Don't let the humility of a poor man deceive you. You are comfortable, Debby. Don't throw that away. Debby listened to both sides. Her mind turned, but her heart stubborn. Deep inside, she yearned for marriage at all costs. To her, the fear of staying single was far greater than the risk of marrying Emeka. Red flag, blue flag, or whatever color he might be, against all odds, she made up her mind she would marry Emeka. Emeka was giving Debby every vibe her heart craved. He opened car doors for her, tidied up everywhere anytime he visited, and carried himself with a kind of humility that made her feel like the most cherished woman alive. Every gesture painted him as a perfect gentleman, and Debby was swept away. One quiet evening, unable to hold back her feelings anymore, she asked him, "Emeka, honey, do you love me? Do you want to marry me?" His answer was as expected, sweet words laced with promises, and that was all Debby needed. Determined to seal their love, she took matters into her own hands. Debby bought an engagement ring, planned the entire engagement party, and even purchased beautiful clothes for Emeka that made him look refined and polished, nothing like the struggling mechanic he was. On the night of the party, with friends and family gathered, Emeka knelt down exactly as Debby had instructed. With the ring she had chosen, he asked for her hand in marriage. Debby acted surprised, her face glowing with joy as she dramatically said yes. The hall erupted with cheers and applause, cameras flashing, hands clapping. That night marked the beginning of what everyone thought was their fairy tale love. Debby believed she had secured her happiness, certain that love could conquer everything. Within months, the traditional rites were completed and the wedding followed soon after. Every occasion screamed luxury. Designers' outfits, lavish decorations, endless food and music that echoed joy. All expenses paid by Debby. To the outside world, Debby and Emeka looked like the perfect couple stepping into their happily ever after. Days after the wedding, Debby was still wrapped up in love, basking in the glow of being a newlywed. But one morning, reality struck hard. She was already running late for work, rushing to beat the usual traffic. As she leaned in to kiss Emeka goodbye, he suddenly demanded, "Go and make my food before you leave." Debby, still smiling, replied gently, "The chef had already prepared breakfast. It's on the table." But Emeka's expression hardened. "I don't want the chef's food. I want to eat the food my wife cooked with her own hands." At first, Debby thought it was a joke. She tried to step away, reaching for her bag, but in a flash, Emeka grabbed her arm forcefully. Pulling her back, his voice thundered, "Never walk out on me when I'm talking." Debby froze. Her heart pounded in disbelief. The man who had once opened car doors for her, who made her feel like the most cherished woman alive, had just revealed a side she never imagined. In denial, she forced a smile, whispering, it's fine. I'll do it next time," before hurrying out, her mind racing. From that moment on, it was as if everything came crashing down at once. Nothing Debby did seemed to please Emeka. She lowered herself, doing everything she could to make him comfortable so he wouldn't feel intimidated by her success. She cooked, cleaned, obeyed, even swallowed her pride countless times. But still, nothing ever seemed enough. The slaps came for the most meaningless reasons. Sometimes it was because she didn't answer quickly enough. Other times because she spoke when he didn't want her to. His voice became a constant weapon, lashing out at her with insults that tore at her soul. "You are lazy," he would shout. "You can't even take care of your home." Debby's heart bled with regret. She knew she had entered one chance, a trap she had walked into with her eyes wide open. The charming man who once made her feel like a queen was gone. In his place was an insecure tyrant who found pleasure in breaking her spirit. And yet she stayed. She endured the maltreatment, swallowing the pain and shame. All she wanted was to prove to the world and to herself that her choice wasn't a mistake, even if it killed her inside. She was determined to hold on, at least long enough for the marriage to see its first month. But deep down, Debby knew she was living on borrowed time. Often when they stepped out together, Emeka would insist on collecting the car keys from Debby. At first, she thought little of it, but one day she asked gently, "Babe, why do you always take the car keys from me?" His reaction was like fire. "So you want the whole world to see that you have a car while I don't? Is that how you respect your husband? Must you rub it on my face that I don't have a car?" Debby stood stunned. Her lips trembled. She hadn't meant any harm. She only wanted to understand. But before she could defend herself, Emeka turned the table around with such venom in his words that she began to doubt herself. By the end of the argument, it was Debby who found herself apologizing, begging for peace, while Emeka sat back satisfied with her submission. It became a pattern. Every outing, every discussion, every little misunderstanding ended the same way. Debby in tears apologizing for crimes she never committed. One day, Emeka sat back in the living room, stretching his legs with the confidence of a man who believed he had conquered his word. In his mind, Debby was subdued, broken and fully under his control. He strutted about the house like a king, giving commands and expecting immediate obedience. With reckless abandon, he took Debby's money and spent it on drinks and endless nights with his friends. The funds she had once handed him, money meant to set up a standard business for his future, had all been squandered. Yet, without shame, he returned again and again to demand more. He pushed Debby around as though she were a servant in her own home. To him, she was no longer the bright, independent woman he had pursued, but an object to use, a shadow of her former self. But what Emeka didn't realize was that every insult, every slap, every humiliation was slowly filling a cup inside Debby, a cup of pain and endurance. And once that cup overflowed, there would be no going back. One beautiful afternoon, Debby finished cooking a delicious pot of soup. She had done it with care, seasoning it to perfection, pouring into it all the love she had left. With a bright smile, she called out, "Honey, your food is ready." Emeka walked into the dining room with his usual long face. He sat down, lifted the cover of the soup, and in an instant his expression twisted into rage. Before Debby could ask what was wrong, the bowl of soup came crashing down on her head. "How dare you? How dare you give me only 2 pieces of meat?" he bellowed. "Are you trying to mock me in my own house?" His curses filled the room as he ranted, veins bulging on his neck. Debby froze for a moment, the hot soup dripping down her face, her dignity burning inside her. Something in her snapped that very instant. She had endured enough. With lightning speed, she spun around and delivered a kick so sharp and unexpected that Emeka stumbled backward, gasping. He had never imagined this quiet, submissive woman could fight back. What he didn't know was that Debby was a blue belt in karate, something she had tucked away in the pages of her past life. That afternoon, Emeka got the beating of his life. Every suppressed tear, every insult, every slap she had endured fueled her blows. When she was done, she dragged his weakened body into the store and locked the door behind him. Wiping her face clean, Debby reached for her phone and made a call. A few moments later, 2 hefty men pulled into Debby's compound. By then, she had already packed every single thing that belonged to Emeka: clothes, shoes, including the ones and everything she bought for him. Calm but firm, she handed the man the address of his old mechanic shop, the very place where their paths had first crossed. "Drop him there," she instructed without a shred of hesitation. The men dragged Emeka out of the store with ease, carrying him like a helpless child. Fear was etched all over his face. The arrogance he once wore, long gone. He stammered, pleaded, but his words fell on deaf ears. They dumped him right in front of his former workshop. His belongings scattered around him like broken dreams. One of the men leaned in close and delivered the final blow, not with his fist, but with words that pierced deeper than any punch. If you value your life, lose Debby's number. Forget her address. Don't ever cross her path again. With that, they turned and left, leaving Emeka stunned, humiliated and stripped of the throne he thought he had built. Debby sat down in her now quiet living room and wept bitterly. Not because Emeka was gone, but because of what she had endured in silence, all in the name of staying married. Her tears carried shame, regret and relief all at once. Shaking, she reached for her phone and called the one friend who had always been brutally honest, Cynthia. Within minutes, Cynthia was at her side, holding her as she sobbed uncontrollably. When Debby's tears had slowed, her voice cutting like truth always does. Debby, I won't beat you because you're already down, but I need you to take this as a huge lesson. Never marry low just because you think time is no longer on your side. God's time remains the best. She cupped Debby's face, forcing her to look into her eyes. Remember what I told you. Nobody has ever died from being single, but a lot of women have died for marrying wrong. You nearly became one of them. Debby's lips quivered as fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. But this time, they weren't tears of weakness. They were tears of awakening. For the first time, she realized that true peace was better than a toxic marriage, and that rushing into love could cost more than loneliness ever would. That day, she made a silent vow. She would never again compromise her worth for the fear of being alone. Years later, Debby's story turned into one of beauty and redemption. Out of the ashes of her pain, God lifted her into a new season. She met a handsome, loving young man, a multi-millionaire, whose heart was richer than his pockets. Unlike Emeka, he valued her for who she was and treated her like the treasure she had always been. Together they built an empire, a home filled with laughter, respect and endless love. Children surrounded their table, their voices filling the air like music. No longer did Debby cry herself to sleep. Her tears had been replaced with joy. Her past remained a scar, a reminder of the dangers of rushing into marriage. But it was also her testimony that patience and faith in God's timing would always bring the best. And so, Debby lived the life she once dreamed of, not in desperation but in peace. Truly, she found her happily ever after. Thank you so much for watching. If you have not subscribed to our channel, please do. Like and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss out on any of our amazing stories. Bye.